All right, hello, folks. It's the guy with the bow tie checking with you live for another edition of Business with Benefits. To my right, we have Miss Monique Russell, communications expert. And those of you on Team Replay, thank you for joining in. If you are on Team Live, throw the hashtag below Team Live. Learn that from Sherry Jones. Love seeing the Team Live hashtag. But Monique, you're in your home office today?
Yes, I am at my home, and I am happy to be here on the show today.
Good. You have kids, right?
Of course, I have two boys. My oldest one is in college, but actually they closed his school down, so he went back last night to go get his stuff, and so they'll be online for the rest of the semester.
Okay.
And my youngest one is 13; he'll be 14.
Okay.
So yeah. Mm-hmm.
So how are they embracing the new normal right now?
The new normal for the kids is fine. My oldest one, he's pretty, chill, go with the flow with everything. And we actually were looking forward to him spending time home because he was going to have to go to an internship in the summer. And so from school, he would go to an internship, which is what he did last summer. And now we actually have time to spend together. And my youngest one, he's been homeschooled for almost 4 years. So it's
perfect.
No disruption here at all.
That's the funny thing about that. That the homeschoolers are like, "What are y'all freaking out about? This is normal for us."
Yeah. That's what he said. He was like, you know what? I feel like I'm missing out. I feel like I'm missing out with this disruption.
Well, checking in with the audience real quick. We had Catherine. Catherine, let me get your last name right. I want to say it's Fasanella. She said hi.
Hey, Catherine.
Misha, she's a great woman focusing on professionals over 40. She said hi.
Yes, what's up, lady?
So today we're going to talk about communication. So with everything going on, I thought this is super timely. Because even me, when I have communication with several people, sometimes emails come across differently because we're urgent or rushed or focused on that. So tell me what you think communication is, just high level, what you define communication as.
Communication is the exchange of information, intent, verbally and non-verbally between two or more parties. And you want to make sure that the message that you are sending as the sender is resonating with the receiver in the way that you intend. And a lot of times there's confusion that happens in the midst of both the message being sent and the message being received. So we have to find ways to make sure that we remove the confusion and make things clear for it to connect.
Yep, I agree. I think that's where I always joke with people about text messaging. You can't ask men 2 questions in a text message because they never get this. The first question is ignored. They're like, whatever the last thing was, that's what I'm answering.
Has that been your experience?
Oh, yes, I do the same thing sometimes. They're like, I asked you this too. Like, you did? Like, it's something with the male brain. We can't see 2 questions for some reason. I don't know why.
Well, you know what? I'm not going to agree with that. It all depends.
This male.
There are men that communicate with clarity, and there are women that communicate with clarity, and there are men that don't, and there are women that don't. So let's just get those generalizations out of the way first.
There we go. And that leads to a good point then. You and I were talking about emotional intelligence. So some people have heard that as a buzzword and don't know what it means and kind of think it's just something floating in the internet. So emotional intelligence, for those who don't know, kind of break it down in layman's terms for people.
So emotional intelligence has pretty much the structures of interpersonal and intrapersonal communication. Intra, meaning in, which is inside yourself, how you see yourself. This is your self-awareness and your self-motivation, self-management. And then inter is how you get along with other people, pretty much your social skills and your relationship management skills. So if you think of those 4 elements or those 4 brackets, it's basically, how am I communicating with myself? And then how does my communication with myself influence my communication with other people?
Okay.
So that's pretty much it in a nutshell. Most people would say emotional intelligence is something that people need when they're not coming across positively, because you'll always hear someone say, oh, he needs some emotional intelligence. Okay. You really need to help this one. Some emotional intelligence. And they're usually saying that when they feel like someone is coming across in a negative way. But that is not really the case. It's the whole aspect of understanding your strengths, your weaknesses, what you're motivated by, what you're driven by. Your energy levels, for example. Sometimes you have time in the morning that you work best, and instead of putting complex tasks towards the end of the day, you may find that you work best in the morning. So you need to use that information and plan your day more effectively. So that falls on your self-awareness piece. And then your self-management, so once you have that information and that knowledge, you can do something about it. So if you know that you get tired by 12 o'clock, you could do something about it. You get up and walk, you can go for a stretch, make sure you don't plan any meetings during that time and things like that. So that's on the self-management, self-regulation aspect, and the things that trigger you in those areas. And your social skills is really being able to understand and put yourself in other people's shoes, right? What is this person trying to communicate? What might they have been thinking when they express themselves? And then being proactive. So when you're managing your relationship or you're nurturing your relationship, I see this a lot of times, especially in sales professionals, you forget to actually nurture outside of the quote unquote business, right?
Yeah.
So you have to think about nurturing those relationships. And even in your personal life, when you are connecting with your friends or your family, sometimes the people that are closest to you, you feel like just because they're there, they got your back. But they are the ones that need more of your time and attention.
Yeah. That's a good point. And then checking in with the audience real quick. Catherine said, I hate when people text in all uppercase and in bold.
Listen, I see this new trend, Catherine, where people are writing in all lowercase. I had that experience not too long ago, and I'm like, that's interesting. And I will tell you, I'll be honest, when I first saw it, everything from grammar school rose up in me, and I was like, oh, write with a capital I.
Right.
But, some people use it as a branding tool or whatever have you. But the most important thing is, did you understand what they were trying to say? Was the message clear? Did it confuse or cause blocks in the transmission of the message? Okay. And if you can't focus on anything else outside of that, then the answer to that question is yes.
Yeah, well, it brings a point to me when we're thinking about the digital age, because that drives me crazy too when people do grammar errors and stuff like that. But in the social media age, how important is emotional intelligence when it comes to how you show up on LinkedIn?
Oh, that one is a good one, Daryl. So how you show up on LinkedIn, it's everything. Your emotional intelligence, the aspects of self-awareness, and self-management and relationship awareness and management and social skills is everything. So I actually did speaking the other day on how to be a thought leader on LinkedIn by Gloria Buzian, and the topic I spoke about was imposter syndrome. Because a lot of people were sharing and speaking that they were struggling with imposter syndrome and not knowing how to communicate on LinkedIn or even what to post or what to write, and fear of rejection and all that other stuff. And now in this whole age of social media, it's like you have to really understand why you're doing what you're doing. You have to understand and define and design yourself first. You have to go within. And if you start externally and you just start posting and maybe someone doesn't like it or you feel rejected, or if someone sends you a nasty message in the inbox, you might take a blow and you might give up. Yeah. And it's because you haven't done the work in the proper sequence, which is designing and defining who you are and really understanding the message that you want to communicate, so that once you're clear on that, you can show up and you can engage in a meaningful and a thoughtful way. So it's everything. If someone is provoking you online, the self-management part of emotional intelligence requires that you understand how to do that. And your brand is everything. So how you respond, how you engage, how you choose not to engage, everything is being taken into consideration in terms of how people perceive your brand and what they feel about you. Now, if you don't care, then you do whatever you want. You do whatever you want. It was one way or the other. Yeah. But if you do care about how you are perceived and how you show up, and you want to make sure that what you're sharing is incongruent in alignment with who you are, then you want to take the time to do those steps first. Because if you're showing up in a way that is inauthentic and you're just trying to be someone that you're not, you're going to struggle. You're going to feel the imposter syndrome. You're going to feel so many negative feelings that are harmful for you. So I would just encourage anyone who is concerned about how they show up on LinkedIn to know that you have an online persona and you have a offline persona, and you want to make sure that those two are in alignment.
Okay, and then some check-ins real quick. Catherine said, since I always manage a large staff, I would hesitate and ask if any more had any questions or if what I was saying made sense. I think that's a good practice. I mean, whenever you speak to people, does it make sense? Do you agree with that?
Can you say it again? Because I got lost in what the...
Oh, she said, I always manage a large staff and I would hesitate and ask if any more had any questions or if what I said was making sense.
Oh, so in other words, getting clarity.
Yes.
Just asking for clarification. Absolutely, it's a good practice, because sometimes we think that we are communicating in our mind, we think we're communicating really clear. But when you are asking for clarity or ask someone, did I miss anything? What have I not considered? Then you might have someone who would speak up and say, oh, well, maybe you should think about, 1, 2, or 3. And I would also say too, when you do ask for clarity and you ask for the questions, pause. And now that we're in the digital economy or the digital work mode, that pause might feel uncomfortable, but it's very necessary. So I've been on calls where questions were asked, anybody have anything to say? Okay, since nobody says anything, you move right along. But I would say go on ahead and give it some time, because I know that there are times where people are gathering their thoughts. And they just need time. So, you may say count to 5. Does anyone have any questions? Did I miss anything?
Or it could be on mute. That could be a problem too. I mean, people don't give them time to unshut themselves off mute. So by the time they get done, then it's like, oh, we're moving on to the next thing. Susan also said, Suzanne here, totally agree. I love the info and the delivery. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Catherine said, I always take a step back before I respond, or maybe respond back the next morning. I'm definitely a fan of not responding to an email right away, especially if it's emotionally charged. I like to wait. So that's good to bring up actually right now. We're going to be a lot more messaging and emailing for the next few weeks, probably. So how do you feel about, waiting to respond to an email or a message that kind of rubbed you some kind of way?
Yeah, I mean, I think that goes without saying, right? We know this in theory. I don't think I find anyone, I mean, even my 13-year-old will say, don't respond right away. I don't think we know this in theory, but where we struggle is with the application. We struggle with the application. And sometimes it just comes right out so quickly. So it's going to require you to practice. And now your world may have been turned upside down. I want to just encourage you, anyone and everyone that is listening and watching, to first recognize that things, yes, they're different, but to also know that you're not going to be 100%. You cannot expect to deliver at the same level of productivity that you delivered when things were different. So maybe if you are at 70%, that's okay. That's okay. Just focus on the next right thing, whatever that next right thing is, and give yourself some space to take the time to make those decisions that you need. You might make some decisions that may not be the best, but I think right now we have an opportunity. We're forced in many ways to grow, to really stretch our communications capabilities. And the first thing we have to do is have patience and recognize and acknowledge that everything is just not going to be as smoothly as we anticipate.
Yeah, Suzanne had a good comment. She said, my father always said, sleep on it.
Yeah, sleep on it, sleep on it. And you know what? When you come back, I'd even say, even when you're writing content, there's so many times when you're writing content, and I know for me, especially if I am tired,
Yep.
If I'm tired, fatigue impairs your decision making. It
Mm-hmm.
definitely impairs the way you see things, and it impairs the way you perceive an event. So if
Mm-hmm.
you are tired and if you're stressed, definitely take a step back and give it some time.
So with that also being said, so some people don't know how emotionally intelligent they are. Like they don't know their EQ. So would you say that's an assessment you go over offline and online? That there's separate assessments. So like how is my EQ in person and how is it offline? I mean online, or is
Hmm.
it just one blanketed test?
Or if there's what?
Or is it just one test? Like, is there one test for your EQ overall, or do you
No,
look at them
there's
separately?
there are tons of tests that all focus on different aspects. Some are more complex than others based on
Mm-hmm.
whatever their needs are. Travis Bradbury has a test that I use sometimes with the clients that I have, and other tests that I use are like DISC and
Yeah.
self-assessment tests that I go over with the client, and we have a conversation around it. So the one test, no test is going to give you everything. It's not going to be the
Okay.
end all be all. It can't, assess all your motivations and your values and beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
But with a skilled professional, with a competent professional, they can use the test to have the starting point of the conversation and then take it further so that you can now pull out the goals that you're going to use to focus
Mm-hmm.
on the areas that you want to improve on.
Okay.
So that's definitely the first part. I know some people say, well, I went and I just thought about it, but we can't see the picture from inside the frame. I work with coaches and
Mm-hmm.
professionals who help me see my blind spots. So that's something that I would definitely encourage and suggest for anyone.
Okay. So with those two parts, the intra and the intrapersonal, if somebody's kind of going through and they realize, oh my gosh, I have poor emotional intelligence. Would you say they should work on the intra first and then the inter, or does it depend on?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
yes, 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 absolutely. Um, you cannot you cannot do the sequence the other way around, working on the
Okay.
outside, which is what most people really want to do. I want
Mm-hmm.
to be seen as a strong leader. I want to have my public speaking skills,
Mm-hmm.
strong. But a lot of times you can have all those tactical steps. So you could have
Mm-hmm.
all the external movements, you can have the posturing and the positioning, but
Mm-hmm.
inside yourself, you'll know how you feel. You'll know.
Right.
So my recommendation, and it is my belief, that you have to start from the inside out. Starting from
Mm-hmm.
the outside in, I've done that. It doesn't work. It's a myth. It's a lie.
Okay.
It's a total lie. But we are now in a space where we have an opportunity to do that. We
Mm-hmm.
have an opportunity to really go within and look within and define and decide, like, what are we going to do in the
Mm-hmm.
absence of a vision. I'll say this. A lot of times before this crisis, in an organization that might be struggling with effective communication,
Mm-hmm.
finding the vision or finding the common goal was often a focus. We'd have to come
Mm-hmm.
in and we'd have to, help to find and refocus and get clear, and then bring in activities and exercises to facilitate that conversation. Where
Mm-hmm.
we are now, we are at a time where we have been forced, we've been given a vision. We've been
Mm-hmm.
forced to have a vision, and that vision is taking shape around what that whole common goal should be for our families and also for our workplaces.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we can look at this situation. There's a lot of uncertainty, but
Yeah.
we can choose to look at the situation and say, how can we now use this moment where we are to
Mm-hmm.
realign or rediscover what our goal is as a family? How are we going to come through this? What do we need to discuss? What do we
Mm-hmm.
need to do to plan and prepare? How can we structure our family talks, our conversations? And
Yep.
the same thing can apply in the workplace as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, that makes me think when you mentioned doing the opposite way you tried that. So how does it usually appear? Like if we see somebody that's working on interpersonal before intra, how does that usually show up in as far as the other person receiving the message?
So, hmm. How do you know if someone's working internally?
Like if you kind of see like this person's, it's like it's an act. Does it show up as like phony, or does it have moments where they just let out their true self? Like how does that usually? Because I know a lot of leaders are looking at emotional intelligence as a leadership tool, saying the emotional intelligence is all about leadership. But when people work on just like you said, the tactics, does that come off disingenuous? Does it come off as micromanaging? Like how does that appear to the person receiving the message when you're not working on the inside first?
Well, I think it could come across in a number of ways.
Okay,
First, emotional intelligence is not just for leaders or those who have a
absolutely.
title or position. It's for everybody,
Mm-hmm.
all of us, and we are all leaders. And
Yep.
how it can come across, it's not something where you are going to know what someone is actually doing or working on, but in the interactions, how
Mm-hmm.
you feel. If you feel that a lot of times you have intuition and you can feel if someone is being fake or if they're being
Mm-hmm.
genuine with you.
Right.
Um, it's not something where you are going to arrive to a point where you're never going to make a mistake, or you say, oh, this person, yelled at someone, or this person is micromanaging someone, because
Mm-hmm.
those types of behaviors can happen, and you can have high emotional intelligence in one area and lower emotional intelligence in another area.
Okay.
So comprehensively, you will have to assess on a case by case basis how that relationship is developed, what type of boundaries are being set, what type of boundaries are being broken. It's not
Mm-hmm.
something where you could just point and say, you, Daryl, you have this bad emotional intelligence and you're not working on yourself. Because the truth
Yep.
is, we all have it, we all have varying levels, and
Mm-hmm.
we all have challenges and areas that we are going to continue to get better in.
Okay. And I'm glad you mentioned the leadership thing because I feel like the industry pushes emotional intelligence in the leadership industry. So why do you think it's only heavily, not only, but why do you think it's heavily focused in leadership versus all of us?
Well, because it is absolutely necessary. So those who are in leadership roles have huge responsibilities. There's so much that's resting on the shoulders. There's so many
Mm-hmm.
different focuses and tasks, and also just being able to manage or nurture the relationships for people. That's really the biggest thing. And that's
Okay.
why it is so heavily pushed there. It is a requirement, it's an absolute must. You
Mm-hmm.
cannot be an effective leader if you don't have the emotional intelligence skills. And as you know, things often start and they trickle down. So
Yep.
if you have a leader who is lacking in self-awareness, those behaviors spill into their leadership team, and
Mm-hmm.
those behaviors spill down all the way down to the frontline employees that are working in day to day and hands on the product and the services. So
Mm-hmm.
it would make a little bit more sense for those to focus on the higher level roles so
Mm-hmm.
that it can cascade down into the organization. But we are moving away from that. We're moving away from
Okay.
the a fact that only those in the higher level positions should focus on emotional intelligence. It should be everyone, and it's being open and offered to everyone. For
Mm-hmm.
example, I had a conversation with one of my professional colleagues just yesterday, and he's over at Better Up is an organization that is just providing coaching to everyone in the organization, sort of like on demand. And it's
Okay.
because you are taking into consideration that everyone has those needs, and you're
Mm-hmm.
developing the needs of the whole person, not just a few at the top. Now,
Okay.
I'll also say that this has been something that has been targeted to more senior leaders or senior executives because there's a significant investment. There's a
Yeah.
significant investment that comes with that, especially when you're helping, it's like a car engine and you're going into the car, but you're going into the mind and into the brain and into the beliefs and into the ideas. And you're
Mm-hmm.
helping people to see things in new ways that have
Mm-hmm.
transformative and lasting impact.
I
So
love that.
naturally, I would say that's why it has been targeted that way. But where we are right now, that's not the case. It's open to everyone.
Okay. And
And I
speaking to
like the way
everyone,
we're, yeah, I like where we're headed.
Well, good. I checked Catherine, or Susan said, yes, Catherine, about after a meeting, I take notes and send them out to make sure we're on the same page. So clarity again. So Catherine is great with clarity. Definitely.
Yes.
Suzanne said, I love this. The more genuine I become, the more insight I had. I love that too.
Yes.
Donovan said, EQ is critical. And then Suzanne said, the front line is compromised. And I think we've seen this in certain establishments with good EQ. If you kind of compare, I think, like Chick-fil-A versus a Burger King or McDonald's, that's, I think, a clear example of the front line has emotional intelligence at Chick-fil-A, but not so much when you go to a Burger King or McDonald's. You're like, what can I get you? What do you need? So with that change going on now, would you say there's some great tools for the employee to look at for emotional intelligence that they might not be aware of?
Employees also need to be exposed. I mean, if you think about what Chick-fil-A does in terms of development and training is often one of the first things that people say, oh, we're going to cut it out. We're going to get rid of it, right?
Yep.
So the proof is in the pudding, right?
Yep.
So if you invest in your team, the output is going to be different. And I think that's really the bottom line. So when everyone has access to the same type of training, the same type of development, the same type of support, then it spreads throughout the organization and it has a ripple effect. If it's only reserved for select individuals, well, in pockets, we may have a team, one department that might be, man, this is the team that I want to join. And then you may have another team that's struggling. But again, where we are right now, I think we have an opportunity to explore.
Okay.
Spreading out the accessibility of emotional intelligence training, emotional intelligence conversations, and awareness among the team. I think this is a perfect time for us to now really take a step back, not think about reducing in those areas, but giving the employees the things that they need. Things like mindfulness, access to, the corporate spirituality mentality, and coaching, because your employees right now are at home. Some of them are at home and they're not used to working from home. That in itself is a trauma. And so expecting someone to just figure it all out, I think is unrealistic. I had a conversation with one of my neighbors earlier today on our walk, and she was upset that, some people don't even know how to, turn on mute, and, because they're not used to it. And I said, no, did you think about having just a basic workshop? How to enter a meeting, how to turn mute on and off.
Yep.
We're now at that point where this can be something that's just given to everyone.
I think we forget that because we've been doing it in leadership. They know, like, you go to a WebEx, this is what you do. So I think it's definitely a problem we have to address right now. And I wanted to ask the audience, share a comment if you've done any kind of studying in emotional intelligence. Because I know for me, I didn't start studying emotional intelligence until I got into leadership in my business. When it was just me, it wasn't like a focal point for me. I wish I'd started sooner. But I'm curious for the audience. Let me know if you've done any kind of studying in emotional intelligence. Just type EQ in the comments if you have. Donovan said, I agree, you have to be intentional. And then Suzanne said, Chick-fil-A hires the best, hats off to their HR. I want a question about that. Do you think they hire the best, or you think it's a lot of development they spend in Chick-fil-A?
I think it's a combination.
Okay.
I think it's a combination. So, and I say that because I know we are in this microwave economy, and want things quick and fast and checkbox. And emotional intelligence is one of those things that we really can't just put 1,000 people in a room and say, let's get this thing at scale, right?
Yeah.
So it's not going to be one thing. It's going to be a combination of things. It's not going to happen overnight. It's like, think about where your favorite song, right? Your favorite song that you have, and you know the words to the song, right? Yeah, so you singing this song and you singing along, but you didn't sit down and get your notebook and start writing the words to the song. You heard it over and over and over and over. It became into your subconscious, and then it became just something that once you heard the beat, you would start singing. Or watched a movie. I know my husband has watched Forrest Gump at least 50 times. Right? If I hear this thing one more time, at least 50 times. But each time you watch a movie or each time you hear it, your brain is picking up something different. You might read a book more than once and you say, oh, I didn't see that, or I never picked that up. And that's the same way with emotional intelligence and enhancing your self-awareness. So you might start with the awareness, the knowledge piece, maybe just understanding what it is, but just knowledge is not enough. You need to have application, you need to have exercises, but over time and with practice, you'll be able to get better at managing what comes up, at identifying how you're feeling, and at being able to move a negative feeling to a positive feeling in a moment's notice. When I first started on this journey, listen, there would be some times where I would run into a situation or I'd be frustrated and I'd have an obstacle, and it would take me, I don't know, at least maybe a week or a week and a half. I'd still be thinking about it, think that I got over it, bring it back up again with my friends, call my mom, whatever have you. You know, sometimes this thing is still playing. And then over time, it got to a point where as I was practicing, I could identify what I felt and I could find ways to move from a negative emotion to a positive emotion.
Okay.
So have you ever had a situation where you might have talked to someone, or you might have walked into a room, or you had a meeting, or you started your day in a certain emotional state and you felt really strong, and then for some reason you felt really crappy?
Oh yeah, I mean it happens all the time. The energy gets sucked out the room. They suck the energy out the room.
But now identifying when and what caused the shift, right? That when we can identify, okay, this is what happened, this is what was said, and that's how it made me feel. And you have a little bit more clarity in what's going on, and now you can begin to actually use the tools to develop strength in that area. So that's pretty much what I would say in terms of, where the onus lies in an organization. It lies everywhere. It lies in the HR. It lies in the hands of the development, training and development, but it also lies in the responsibility of the individual. It's your job. It's your job now to take responsibility to better yourself.
Well, and I think what's going on right now with this whole pandemic and everything, I feel like there's going to be a surge of unemployment when this all settles, because several industries like service, hospitality, restaurants are kind of just shutting their doors for at least 2 weeks, could be longer. And I feel like that's going to create a surge of people that are just let go of a job because they're like, this is our chance to get rid of them. We got rid of this person finally, and this is our way out. So with that said, is there something employers can look at? Like, is there any way to spot emotional intelligence in the interview process or in the resume?
So what people have done is they use certain types of questions to see how aware an individual is when they are interviewing. But you can have those questions. I don't know, Daryl, you're never going to get it 100%. You just have to know that. You're never going to get everything all the way 100%. But there are questions that people use to assess how aware an individual is. So questions like, tell me about a time where you struggled. Tell me about a time where you had a conflict with a coworker, and what role did you play in it? There's certain types of questions that you can use to assess how aware an individual is. Is that all that you should use? No. Is it something you should use? Absolutely. And know that a lot of times you're going to have someone in your role that may not be aware, but if you give them the tools, and if they are someone that is coachable and they can learn and practice and implement, then you don't want to just rule someone out just because they're not answering your question to a perfect T. And another thing to consider is that when you are in the hiring process, a lot of times that same hiring process is influenced by how that person is feeling during the day. You can interview with someone in the morning and you can interview with someone in the afternoon and have two totally different outcomes. That's just how fickle these things are. So having a solid criteria will help to mitigate some of those risks and challenges. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not, that's not my lane. That's not my space in terms of crafting interview questions and all of that stuff. But from what I have seen and how I've worked with individuals in that area, this is some of the things that I've seen, and those are my thoughts around what we need to do in terms of looking at the whole picture, not just focused on one set of criteria when we're making decisions to bring someone in an organization. Do they have the skills? Do they have a good attitude?
Mm-hmm.
We
And
need
then
to
we
look
had
at
some
things as well.
comments real quick. Suzanne said, "Yes, I have. Generally, it was shifting from others to me, self-absorption, referring to the when you go through a bad situation. That question you asked me earlier." She says, "Some people are good at an ad lib. You would never know." I think that's true. I mean, you never. It's kind of like dating. You just meet the representative when they first show up to a relationship of any sort. So
Yeah.
I think that's going to be an issue for people going forward. But kind of right now, it sounds like the biggest thing I've heard you say several times is awareness. So if someone were to leave this conversation, it sounds to me like working on self-awareness is probably the foundation of emotional intelligence. Like that's the first before anything happens. You got to work on your awareness.
Yes, you have to work on your awareness. This is the time where you get an opportunity. If you were feeling hesitant about engaging with someone before, sometimes people are hesitant because they feel, oh, it's going to make me look like I am incompetent. But coaching is one of the fastest ways to maximize your human potential. I know this. It's one of the fastest ways to help you get to self-awareness, and you have to go on the inside. And once you're going on the inside and you're being clear, it's going to influence how you bring your personality, how you show
Mm-hmm.
up, how you engage with others. It's going to also help you have more compassion because
Mm-hmm.
now you understand how you do things, and you might, instead of having this high level of expectation for everyone around you, it could be connected to the fact that you have such high expectations you have for yourself that you're struggling in that area as well. So
Yeah.
going on the inside impacts and influences how you connect with your children, with your spouse, with the employers, with your team members. You have to start from the inside out.
Yep. And then a comment we have from Miss Salita Roberts. She said, "What is your definition of being coachable?" And I want to ask you that because when you mentioned giving people the feedback, a secondary question I want to add is, what happens when you give them the feedback of the emotional intelligence and then you get a harsh reaction or nothing? So I guess first is, what's your definition of coachable? And then when the coaching happens, nothing occurs. What's the next step in your opinion?
So, someone that I consider to be coachable is someone who is open to listening and recognizing that, yeah, there are some areas of growth that they can improve on.
Mm-hmm.
Someone who has rigid elements in their thinking, they don't feel that it's necessary. They
Mm-hmm.
don't feel like there's anything else that you can do for them or anything else that you can show them because they've already done that or they know that, or it's always someone else. It's always someone else who's to blame or someone else who is at fault or someone else who is responsible.
Mm-hmm.
So very little um, aspect of taking personal responsibility for anything.
Okay.
That's a very hard place to be. And you said if the coaching doesn't work,
Yeah,
that's what
like
you
you give
said?
the feedback, you give some feedback on, hey, you're not being self-aware, like something you did bother me, whatever the case is, something emotionally unintelligent happens. And you get the feedback to kind of help them, to coach them, but then it falls on deaf ears. What's kind of the next step for you to help drive that message or distance yourself from that person?
So, okay, the way that the feedback is given has to be considered.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes when you are just giving someone and telling them that they're not self-aware, that's sort of like just telling someone stop doing what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
But telling them isn't going to get them to do it, even if they want to. A lot of times, the people that I work with, they have great intentions and they have great desires and they want to improve. And if I were to just say, don't do this, do that, it would be very difficult. So
Mm-hmm.
when we have a coach approach, the only way that you can really get people to want to change or want to improve their behavior is through inspiration. You have to inspire them. You inspire them from within. So helping them to see how that behavior is either hurting or helping is one aspect, and there's a process for that, right? There are certain types of questions and certain types of paths and journeys that you can help that client go on to help them become more aware. Anytime you are just focused on dictating or telling, they're not going to really receive it. They may receive it and just do it out of obligation or fear or guilt. And then we don't have transformational impact. We really don't have any lasting impact.
Okay, and I like that because I think some of us are in a B2B space, and you might have a client that is just like they're a pain to deal with for some reason. That you got the client, you're happy, the revenue's good, and all that, but they aren't aware of how they speak to you and treat you in certain interactions. So for those of us in the advising, consulting, some kind of a servant kind of role for business, how do you navigate that your client has horrible emotional intelligence, but you want them to still be a client?
Yeah, and that's where you get into having conflict conversations. When you have the language to have a courageous conversation and one that is inclusive of the specifics. So instead of saying, you don't talk to me that way.
Yeah.
Well, you don't talk to me that way really isn't helping them because you haven't clearly articulated what it is that they did. So you know what, Daryl, when we were having the conversation about changing over my insurance for my employees, you said this. And when you said this, it came across this way. This is how it made me feel. You may not have intended to do it, but this is how it's coming across. And you're pointing out the specific and you're requesting that in future, I would prefer for you to do this, this, and this. Or you may want to consider instead of telling me, you don't know what you're talking about, I'm smarter than you. Of course, nobody's really going to talk like that, right? But you never know. You never know.
Yep.
But you may want to consider. So you want to structure your feedback or your conversation. And there's many ways to do this depending on what the situation is, but you want to be very clear and very specific. A lot of times people will say, he was just mean. He dims my light. I heard that a lot. He dims my light and my light is dim and my light's not shining. And I don't know what to do with that. Yeah. So we have to get very clear on what does that mean? What happened? What was the situation? What were the words that were used? And then from there, we're able to be very specific in how we're connecting and communicating with the people that are around us. And now I'll tell you this, just because you have the language to communicate, it doesn't mean that you're actually going to do it. So that's where the inside out comes in. It's really something where you have to work on yourself. I worked with a lady who we had a similar situation where she needed to have a courageous conversation. And we went through the whole process. We went through everything. I was like, okay, I can't wait until we talk next time. What's gonna happen? Let's see how this is gonna go. Because she felt really empowered after that conversation. But a week later, 2 weeks later, still nothing had happened. So it's not enough to have the information. You have to have that information, but you also have to have the confidence and the courage to do it.
Yep. That's important, I think, in our day and age. You can find anything you want on the internet now. You can Google and find anything, but how to apply the information is very key.
That's it.
Suzanne said, how do I get in touch with you? She said she likes you. So, plug your website or phone number, whatever.
Yes, I like you to connect with me on LinkedIn. Number one, Clear Communication Coach. Connect with me. My website is clearcommunicationsolutions.com. And I would love to connect with you as well. And if you are looking for a motivational speaker, you can reach out to me and we can continue that conversation as well.
Definitely. And Salita said, thank you for breaking down the coachable portion. I think that's something people say a lot. I'm coachable. We don't really know what that means. So definitely appreciate that. Last comment we had real quick. She said, Salita said, using your active voice instead of your passive voice. I'm not clear about that 100%. When I think active voice, I mean you're actually doing something. But what do you think when you see use your active voice instead of your passive voice?
What do you mean?
Well, she just said the comment says use your active voice instead of your passive voice. She might comment later to say what she means, but I'm not sure what that means. Salita, help us out a little bit with active voice is passive voice, because to me that makes me think of active doing action, passive meaning doing nothing. Maybe when you mentioned that young lady that didn't do anything with the information.
Yeah, so I don't know exactly what she wants us to focus on here, but I would just guess that what she's focusing on is in terms of using the language where you're taking that personal responsibility to identify what it is that you are feeling, right? You know, when this happened, this is what I felt. When you said this is how it came across to me, right? As opposed to, you are doing this to me, or not even addressing it, just a complete passive stance and just letting it stew on the inside, which will then later turn to aggression. And we already know that there's nothing positive about anger residing in our body.
Yeah. Well, I think we found a new talk to your new keynote. Words matter. I'm gonna name you speech right now.
Words matter.
Yeah.
Yes, we have to have the language of conflict. We have to have the language of encouragement and empowerment. So language is very, very, very important. And we also need to earn the right. Just because you are in a leadership role, it doesn't mean that you have a full all access pass just to point out what's not working or what's going wrong. We have to make sure that we are earning the right, so that when you have those conversations that are tough or critical for individuals, that there is a balance. So they know that you have said things positively to them before. And then when you are giving them the critical feedback, it's not like, oh, okay, he only says this to me when things are not going well. So earning the right, and definitely focusing on language, having clarity around the language portion, especially for conflict. Conflict resolution is costing $359 billion a year in the United States.
Man.
Billion with a B.
Yeah.
With a B. And so I think when we can focus on going on the inside, really getting clear, helping to have the right language, then we can have more productive conversations and more connection. Right now, we need more connection. Technology is not the problem. It's how we use technology that's the problem. I have connections all over the world, and I feel extremely connected to them, even though we're not in the physical presence together. But when we do get to that physical connection, it takes it even further. So I know that sometimes we might hear, oh, the technology. But at the end of the day, it's the connection that we want to have with people. We have to bring that love back into our relationships, that love back into our dialogue, and having the genuine care and genuine concern for people.
Yeah, that's definitely, I think social media makes it easier to connect with people, but it's just taking that extra effort to actually make it a connection. And Salita said I was referring to the way you speak to someone when giving feedback. So I guess when you're giving feedback, have an active stance versus passive. You broke that down.
Yes.
So you are the communication expert. You guessed it without even knowing what she was talking about.
well, I was assuming. So, I'm glad that I was on the right path. But yeah, definitely.
Perfect. Well, we're going to let the people go here. I know LinkedIn Meetup ATL was supposed to happen, but obviously with everything shutting down, we got to postpone having you speak to the audience. But kind of share with the people what's coming up for you, for ways to follow you, or interesting things you're working on coming up.
Well, interesting things. Yeah, I can't wait when we do have that LinkedIn local meetup, because I know it's going to be good. I have an exciting topic to talk about, and I'm not going to spill the beans. So you're just going to have to show up and come and see. But yes, but what I am doing is I am offering some virtual workshops. One is in conjunction with a colleague of mine, Carrie Ann Reed Brown. And it's really for those who have the Caribbean heritage and want to know how to leverage it in their workplaces. And also, I have an intimate group work session coming up for those business owners and professionals who really want to know how to position themselves in the digital space, having a
Mm,
strategic footprint. And we'll also do live coaching in that group as well. So, any of those, if any of those are interesting to you, you can also find it on my LinkedIn page. And
mm-hmm.
you can just reach out to me if you want more information. But definitely stay in touch. And if there's anything that I can do to support any of you that are watching, just go on ahead and send me a message.
Perfect. And Monique's great. We met at LinkedIn Meetup ATL last year and kind of been joining at the digital hip for a while.
Yeah. I tell you, so LinkedIn is amazing. I mean, I meet so many people just like you all over. And then you now just look at where we have taken our friendship. So
Yep.
I think for anyone that is interested in building their relationships now, LinkedIn is the place to be.
Mm-hmm.
So don't
I
be
agree.
afraid. Don't be afraid to reach out and connect.
Yep. Well, thank you, folks, for another edition of Business with Benefits. Monique, I appreciate your time. You guys check out the replay and share it with anybody that needs some help with emotional intelligence or just communication for that matter.
Absolutely. Thank you. It was a pleasure being on your show.